Today we talk about how fertility doctors and naturopaths can work together. Today we have a special guest, Tasha Jennings, a fertility naturopath and nutritionist who's been helping couples boost their fertility naturally.
I'm Dr. Mark Amols, and this is Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday.
Well, joining me today is Tasha Jennings, fertility naturopath, nutritionist, and a member of the Fertility Society of Australia. She's the founder of Conceive Baby, helping couples naturally optimize their fertility and prepare for conception. Whether that's at home or in the IVF lab, Tasha, welcome to Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always enjoy chatting.
Well, I was on your show just recently, and I had a blast doing it. I thought you were bringing me on for the perspective of, let's say, an REI doctor and how we work together. And, I thought it'd be great to do the same with you. Do you mind sharing with everyone just a minute or so about just kind of, what got you into infertility naturopath versus just, naturopathic medicine?
Well, I think as with a lot of people in this journey, it was my own journey that really got me into this. I had been a naturopath for, over 10 years at that time. And as we're discussing today, I had actually already always worked in the medical field as a naturopath. I loved working with doctors and pharmacists and specialists. And I was actually now married to a doctor. So the fact that we struggled was a real epiphany to me. I'm like, I got taught in high school how easy it was to get pregnant. How come I'm a healthy 30-year-old naturopath married to a doctor? How come we can't get pregnant? And so I threw myself into doing everything I could to help us conceive, research papers. And then I went beyond that and I contacted the researchers who were doing the research from New York to Adelaide to Italy. I emailed them and said, why are you using certain nutrients? Why are you using those doses? And I was really heartened by their responses. And that's when I became passionate about sharing it. And that's how my podcast evolved initially. I wanted to share this information and then just naturally gravitated to working with patients in this space and work a lot now with fertility clinics and IVF specialists like yourself.
Well, I can actually relate. I had fertility issues as well. And although it maybe wasn't the reason I went into it, it definitely made me want to educate people more. I definitely felt that same feel that there just wasn't the information out there that I wanted. And that's something I wanted to do different. And that's why, I started my podcast. So I completely understand. I think one thing that's really unique for an REI doctor is that we see patients come to us and we'll see them spend sometimes years and years with a naturopath and not get pregnant. Just like you see them go with REI doctors not get pregnant. But there's a little bit of a judgment there. When it's with an REI doctor, it's, things aren't working. Sometimes when it's with a naturopath, there's this kind of feeling doctors have of like, they're not doing as good of a job, that they should have been with an REI doctor. And so one of the things I really wanted to do is talk about how we actually work together. I'm a big believer in alternative medicine. It doesn't mean that I think there isn't a role for allopathic medicine. I do believe there is. But I feel like, this idea that naturopaths are doing, snake oil stuff and we're doing regular medicine is not true, and that we actually work together. And when we were on the podcast together, I mentioned how, I have patients go on special diets and things for certain things. And so I'd love to just, talk about what have you experienced? Now, I know you're in Australia, so it might be a little bit different there, but what has your experience been, as a naturopath in the fertility world? And if you had patients, let's say like our patients, what would you recommend to them how to bridge that conversation between their REI and the naturopath?
I think it's up to the naturopath as well. And I have to say, there is a lot of research there, as you said. There was this perception that a lot of naturopaths are selling snake oil and that nothing is going to work. And there's still that perception out there. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But we do have the research there now. Like I was reaching out to these researchers and contacting these researchers. And so we do know that we can use diet, lifestyle. I love the study that was called Feed Your Genes, how your genes respond to the foods that we eat. And this was a human trial and it took just 6 days to change the gene expression of these volunteers with dietary changes. So we're not just talking about small impact here, we're talking about a significant impact. And when we're looking at these tiny egg and sperm cells, we can have a significant impact. And that's why I particularly love working in the IVF space, because IVF is an amazing technology, creating pregnancies that may otherwise not have been possible. But it's still only as good as the egg and the sperm you're provided. There's only so much you can do with your meds and all your stims and all the technology if we don't have good quality egg and sperm. So it's such a hand in glove fit that I don't know where it came from that naturopaths hate doctors and doctors hate naturopaths. There's still that perception out there, but we can achieve so much more when we work together.
Absolutely. And that's why when I even see my patients, they tell me we're naturopath, I said, you don't have to stop. I said, work with them, because I don't do those things in my office. I can't do certain therapies that they can. But you hit the nail on the head, I think, with this idea of epigenetics, and that these changes in our environment, changes in our bodies, can actually turn on and off certain genes in our DNA.
Yes.
And so it's not just, as you said, like a little bit. It could be changing major things. It could be changing proteins that are made or not made. And that's exactly why we need to work hand in hand, because, unfortunately, I think especially as physicians in the United States, I don't know if it's the same in Australia, but the volume is going up. And as the volume goes up, we're limited on what we can do, unless we have our own nutritionist, unless we have our own, naturopath in the department, we can't do a lot of those things. Our things are going to be very straightforward, like do this, this, and this. And so I definitely see that role. And you're right. I still believe there are some people who look at that way as, a naturopath, but I do see that they're starting to become a little bit of a turn. You see even at the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, they talk about, how these different things can affect it. And so I think that's where I see the way we work together being more of both sides kind of looking at it from that standpoint, right? Because I think, when I was, I'll give you an example, a nurse, like when you did stuff right, you kind of felt like, oh, the doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. Like there was some kind of self, fulfillment of being like, I got it right and they did. And the same thing, the doctors, they're supposed to be higher. So if they make a mistake, they're kind of, they're like, oh, that nurse must have done something wrong. And so I think from that standpoint, we look at it and go, hey, we're doing two different things. We're all working the same goal, but we're doing two different things. You're working with this side. I'm working with this side. And when we work together, it's not about who's doing anything better. We're all doing the same thing to get to the same goal.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you find, like for your patients, have you ever heard of like one of them, doctor tell them not to see a naturopath before?
Yes, I've told them to stop everything they're taking. I've told them they've been told that the naturopath won't help anything. I had one specialist say that if diet had anything to do with fertility, then half the population would be infertile because everyone has bad diets. So there is still that perception there, and I have been told that by patients. But again, the research is catching up. I was actually invited to speak at the Scientists in Reproductive Technology Conference, which is a major conference here in Australia about the science of fertility and reproduction. And I was invited to speak on the natural side of it. And I think that's a real shift that we are now seeing the benefits of diet, lifestyle, and supplement changes in the 90 days prior to egg collection, trying naturally. That is the time where you have, as you mentioned, those epigenetics. Those are the epigenetic changes that are happening when it goes from primordial follicle, which is sitting in your body right now, and then develops into that mature egg. We're getting a better quality egg. It's in my opinion, the most important time in your future child's life is those 90 days prior to them being conceived, because that's when you have the opportunity to pass on the best DNA possible to your future child. And that's why I love this collaboration, because I always say my job is not just to get you pregnant. And they're like, oh, hang on a minute. Isn't that the aim? My job is to have a healthy pregnancy and healthy baby. That is the ultimate goal. And that's what a naturopath can help you do. Have a healthy pregnancy and have a healthy baby. And particularly, probably similar to the States, we're getting older in having babies these days. And so our egg quality may not be as good as it was when we're in our early 20s. I see a lot of my patients are in their late 30s, early 40s. And we now know that it was kind of a presumption that you have old eggs, there's nothing you can do about it. You just got to collect as many as you can and just hope. We now know that's not true. It's not that your eggs are old. It's that your eggs are developing in an older body. So what can we do with that environment to help to optimize it, provide some anti-aging supplements and support and dietary changes that can actually optimize the quality of that egg that's released? You're going to get better chance of conceiving, whether it's naturally or via IVF. Everyone wins.
Absolutely. You mentioned about like a doctor saying, oh, like everyone who has a bad diet wouldn't have kids. But when we really think about it, it's true. A lot of people have bad diets and have kids, but that might be they're different though. And that's the thing. You can't just take a situation and go, well, everyone breathes air. Why do some people get cancer? It can't be. It's like, well, no, the air there might be a little bit different. So there are differences between people. And I know when I was on your podcast, I was talking about this concept. I'm still putting together one of my podcasts about this straw on the camel's back, and how for most people, this little thing may not affect them. But for other people, it may be enough to prevent them from getting pregnant. And there is some truth that if your egg is abnormal, like aneuploid, there is no amount of medication or anything that you can do to fix it. That's impossible.
Yeah.
But I would take the step and say it's actually more important when women are more mature to actually do everything they can to help those other things, because you can't change the DNA part we talked about, but you can change the mitotic issues sometimes. You can change the energy that helps with those things. You can change the inflammation in the body. So when you get that normal egg, and it's not one of the ones that are already destined to fail, that egg has a better chance of making it to the end and giving you a higher success. Whereas the 22-year-old, every egg's good. They could pretty much, smoke crack cocaine and they could probably still get a good egg because all their eggs are good to begin with. And so that's why I say, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Those older women almost even more can benefit from the stuff you do.
Definitely. Because the egg cell is an amazing cell. I find it absolutely fascinating. It contains the most mitochondria of almost any other cell in the body, except for the neuron. But that energy is already in the egg cell at fertilization. That energy carries the growth and development from day 1 all the way to day 3 is all already in the egg when you collect it or whether it fertilizes. And the energy has been fueled in the 90 days prior. And as we get older, we don't have as much of that energy available. So it's really important to prep, to fuel, to give your body the best chance of getting that chromosomally normal embryo, because that takes a ton of energy to produce.
Yeah, there's actually been studies out there have even shown if you take older men and you have them, let's say, try to have a child with a younger woman, they have a better chance than with, let's say, a woman who was the same age. Now that seems common sense because you say, well, yeah, they're older. But even when you look at it from the standpoint of say, okay, we're going to retrospectively look at the analysis and figure out, subtracting certain things. I'm forgetting the word I'm thinking of. Oh my goodness, I can't even think of the term for some reason. But when you go and you look at analytically, you find that even when you subtract the part of the woman being older, it's still better. And it comes back to that point that all the tools are in the egg, all the energy's in the egg. And so it even fixes the male sperm. And so we see this all the time. And so you're absolutely right on that. I love it. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and vice versa as well. If an older woman has a younger partner, because I always, I often say we need Olympic athlete sperm because the egg, does all that work. It doesn't want to have to fix, as you mentioned, it can fix issues in sperm and go on to create a pregnancy, but it doesn't want to have to do that when it doesn't have the energy. So if we have awesome swimmers, not just okay, we're far more likely to get a pregnancy out of an egg that's just okay and then the sperm's just okay. If we have an awesome sperm and a just okay egg, we're more likely to get that pregnancy. So yes, men are just as involved as we get older as well.
Correct. And the way I was trying to say it was when you look at older women and younger women, if you use regression analysis and you subtract the part of their age, you do find that the younger women still have a better chance with older men versus older men with women who are more mature, even using regression analysis to remove that. I'd love to hear some stories if you have like a story or maybe a case or two where you've taken patients who, have struggled, maybe did typical treatment right away, but maybe jumped into it a little too fast, because there are clinics who just go, yep, jump in, don't change anything about you. And you had success with that. I'd love to hear a story or two about that.
Look, a couple of stories come to mind. I know there was one patient that was referred to me. She'd already had 8 failed IVF cycles. She was a poor responder, low AMH, so wasn't getting big egg numbers, but just wasn't getting even to transfer stage. And so she came to me, unfortunately, at 42, which is, it is an older age bracket by then. But I actually asked her to pause for 3 months, so those 90 days. And we really did some deep work on helping her improve her egg quality. And she went back to the IVF clinic, and this time only got 2 follicles still. So still a poor responder, but we got 1 baby and 1 embryo in the freezer. So it's really, as we get older, it's not about getting more necessarily. It's getting the quality of those eggs, which we're able to achieve. And talking about jumping into it, I guess, reasonably soon, there was another patient that comes to mind that she'd been trying for 7 years, some naturally, then went to IVF, and she'd been trying with IVF. And then she was referred by her clinic because they didn't know what else to do. Her test results were quote unquote fine. And then I looked through her tests, and we were preparing for her next cycle. And I said to her, why have they told you can't conceive naturally? And she said, oh, well, I just never have. So I assume I can't conceive naturally. And I remember looking through her results again, thinking, am I missing something? I said, look, I do think you can get pregnant naturally. I said, look, that's okay. We're preparing for your next cycle, but give me a couple of months and we'll prepare for your next cycle. But I do think there is a chance of natural conception. So I do want you to be trying. And so we were preparing for her next cycle. She did try. Within 3 months, on the 3rd month, she had her IVF meds in the fridge, but she didn't get a period because she was pregnant.
Amazing.
And she still sends me updates. I think he's now 5 years old now. And there was that realization that she could get pregnant naturally, and there were some small things that weren't ideal for her. I often see results that are, again, quote unquote fine, but I love working with doctors, obviously. I mean, my husband's an amazing specialist, but they're looking for disease or deficiency, which a lot of people don't have. But if we're 42 or even 38 or over 35, we want everything optimal. And this is what we had to do for the particular patient. So I love, talking about successful stories.
I had a case one time where someone went through IVF, very poor, egg quality, embryos, had a very low blastulation rate. And, they said to me, I really want to get healthier. I'm going to go see a naturopath. And I said, great, and they're going to take 3-4 months off. And they actually did end up taking about 5 to 6 months off. And they came back and we did another cycle, and it was amazing. And I remember her saying, and I made some changes too. And she's like, do you think it was the changes you made or the changes I made? And I said, probably the changes you made. I said, but we worked together. And again, that's another example where working together, I made the adjustments I had to make. I seen the naturopath, they made adjustments, and she had success. And before we were so hopeless because the embryo quality was so poor that, we didn't know things were going to work.
Yeah.
Coming near the end here, a couple more things. I'd love to know, what is your advice for everyone to know? As a naturopath, obviously my advice, I'm always telling people, is like, get in early enough, don't wait. What would be your, advice to people that they should know after today?
That you have the power and the control over your fertility. I think a lot of people, they'll jump into the next special and get another referral, and that's great. You do want the right specialist, but this is within your power to improve your fertility. You have control over the health of that egg and sperm, whether you're trying naturally or through IVF. This is a team effort, not just between a naturopath and the specialist, but between the patient. They have control. You don't want to just turn up to your clinic, hand all your hopes and dreams over to the IVF specialist, because if I can't get pregnant naturally, I'll just hand it all over and they'll do all the magic. And I have had patients say to me, I thought science was magic and I'd just get my baby. We still want to create that healthy sperm and healthy egg, and you have the power to do that right now.
Now, you've heard me say before, IVF is not magic. And this idea that's magic is not true. And unfortunately, a lot of people go into it thinking that, oh, it will just solve everything.
Exactly. Yep.
For my listeners and people who want to find out about you, where can they go to, find out you, your podcast, or even some of the things that you offer to help patients? I would love to let them know about that.
Look, I do have an ultimate egg quality guide, which is probably one of my most popular free downloads at tashajennings.com.au/egg quality. So that is just a free guide that you can get to help to support your egg quality. I also have my Your Fertile Pantry program, which is my online program, which does talk about all the things basically fueling that growth and development at yourfertilepantry.com.au.
Well, one thing I'll say is this, and I don't usually like to make comments where I say, you should, but I would honestly say if there's ever a doctor that's telling a patient you should not see a naturopath, I would be worried if I was a patient. That's the thing I would say with this podcast. Your doctor should always want you to be an advocate for yourself. And it doesn't mean that the doctor's going to agree with everything. But that's why I always say to them, we'll work together. I said, if they tell you to do stuff, let me know. I'll let you know if I agree with things or not, but we'll work together. And, I think it's always great that people do. Not everyone, it's not for everyone. And they shouldn't feel like they have to, but if people want to, I definitely recommend it. I work hand in hand with naturopaths and they do a great job and they help a lot of my patients. And I'm sure you've helped many, many patients as well.
Yeah, and I love this collaboration. It's definitely a team effort.
Well, I greatly appreciate coming on Talk About Fertility Tuesday. I'm sure my listeners are going to like the fact that it's not just me talking all the time.
Thanks for having me.
You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode with Tasha Jennings. If you're interested in some of her material, please check out her website. I have more interviews coming up with other people in the field. If you like this episode, please tell a friend about it. Maybe they have questions about a naturopath and if it's a good idea for them. Also, give us a 5-star review on your favorite medium if you love this podcast, but most of all, keep coming back. I look forward to talking again next week on Taco Bout Fertility Tuesday.